Welcome, everybody. This is Edgardo, Balentine.
And this is DiGregorio. And welcome to the Real Estate of Tomorrow podcast, where we're going to discuss the rapidly changing landscape of the real estate industry.
And the steps that you need to take today in order to survive tomorrow.
Look, I'm going to give you the perspective of a 25-year veteran, somebody who has been there and done that.
With Jesus life for all part, okay?
Screw you, man.
Look, I'm going to give you a fresh perspective from somebody that's applying those steps today.
So that basically means you're young and you don't know shit.
All right. Let's get this started. All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, brother. What's going on? This is DiGregorio.
And Edgardo Balentine. So, listen, let's just jump in.
Yeah,
okay.
dude.
This is a hot topic. A lot of tweets, a lot of Facebook posts, a lot of controversy.
A lot of real estate agents rejoicing.
Yes, very, very, very happy. So, look, I think what we need to do when it comes to a topic like this is let's just step back. Let's see exactly what happened. What is an iBuyer? Okay. Then what did Zillow do? What did Zillow do right? What did Zillow do wrong? And then what does this mean for the industry, for Zillow, and for realtors moving forward?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's important to just stop celebrating things that aren't real. Like I told you the other day, I saw a post saying that Zillow is getting away with Zestimates immediately, and last I checked, Zestimates are still there. So let's just jump in. So first of all, what is an iBuyer?
So look, there is, as we talked about again and again, right? Fintech companies are trying to take over the process, and they're trying to basically cut real estate agents out of it. So an iBuyer is where a company like Zillow Offers or OfferPad or one of those completes a automated valuation model. Okay, this is how much we think the house is worth. They put in an immediate offer to pay for it, pay cash. And in many cases, they allow the seller to remain in the house rent-free for a period of time afterwards. And, I've talked about this in tons of my classes. We have to understand that this is appealing to the concept is appealing to a lot of people. We don't have strangers tramping through the house. We don't have pictures of your house all over, necessarily all over the internet. And not only are there companies like Zillow Offers, which is, now as of right now is defunct, OfferPad is still doing well, but even some of the big companies like Coldwell Banker and some of the big real estate franchises had an iBuyer option for people when agents would go on listing appointments. So the pros of this, if you were to sum them up, is the convenience feature, right? Of course. As a seller, you spend 10 minutes on the internet, do a couple clicks, and then you have, ideally, if it works in your market and blah, 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 an instant offer to buy your house, to sell your house. I recently did a transaction where the seller that was going to buy was selling it to Zillow, and I had the chance to have a conversation with them. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And I'm like, why are you doing this? And she's like, well, we need to buy a house, right? And in order for us to buy, we need to sell. It took us 10 minutes to just get an offer from Zillow, as opposed to going through the process and the motion of putting it in the market.
Sure.
We didn't have time for that. Our life is too chaotic, and buying a house right now is so stressful. So this is as good as cash and as fast as we can do it. So the convenience is there. There's no friction. Now, when we talk about iBuyers, there's always a couple things that are the cons to this, are what the realtors say, well, this is why it doesn't work, and this is what people think it doesn't work. And mainly, the reason why it wouldn't work as a consumer, we're talking about the person selling the house, is because there's this understanding that they're probably going to lowball the offer. Now, we've talked about this a bunch of times, and when you actually take a look at the math, especially pre-pandemic, right? Especially in a normal market, because that's something that we need to talk about and we need to mention.
Of course, it's a huge factor.
Yeah, this market is insane. But pre-pandemic, when you look at what the transaction is from the sales price versus what the client actually nets,
yes,
they say that it's about 15% loss, right? The difference between the sales price and the net price that the client ends up getting is about 15% because...
Let's break that down though, right? So I don't want people to think that we're just pulling a number out. So When I've done research on this, they'll say something like, okay, you're going to sell your house for $500,000 to make up a number. Now let's figure the average commission in your area is 6%. So there's 30 grand that comes off. Let's say the average home in your market, again, not this market. Let's talk about a quote unquote normal market. If there is such a damn thing, it's going to take you 3 months to sell. You're going to sell for 92% of asking price or 94% of asking price. And then what are your carrying costs during the time to sell? So that's where that 15% comes from.
Do you need to repair the house? Do you need to do anything to the house before? So the 15%, once you take all of these things into consideration, especially if you have another mortgage, right? When you're making that payment on the mortgage, 15% seems to be a very, very fair number.
I think it's reasonable.
Right? So Zillow looks at this. They have a hold in the market, right? In the real estate market in general. I think that in 2018, it was the 35th most visited site in the internet. We're talking about a real estate.
I was just going to say, can we think about Google, the magnitude of that? I know we've talked about Facebook and, they have a 20% market share, but it is insanity that a real estate website is ranked at that level. It shows that and you talk about this a lot, Ed, it shows that they've made real estate sexy, where people that aren't interested in buying and selling are still spending time on Zillow researching what their home is worth, researching what their neighbors' homes are selling for. It's a super, super interesting statistic.
Yeah, I mean, I often say that the Zestimate has become a national pastime for Americans.
Yes.
I know I do it. I mean, we can all talk bad about the Zestimate in public. But I know that, in private, when we close the doors, I'm checking my estimates. I like to look at the Zillow feature where I put my homes and it tells me exactly how much I have. Everybody likes to see their net worth, and Zillow gives you an idea of that. You did an interesting research. I mean, it was a small sample, but you did an interesting research. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, and this is something I've done time and time. And what people don't understand that I talk about all the time is that Zillow spends, and this statistic's a couple years old. I haven't gotten the most recent one yet. I haven't seen it published, but about $250 million a year on technology with a B. So, what I've been saying for many, many years now is that dollar figure wins long term. And for quite a while, what I've been doing is a couple times a year, I'll tell my team, look, grab the last 20, 30 deals, compare this estimate to the appraisal. And, I find a couple things. So I find that on larger homes, more custom homes, there's definitely a much larger margin. There's no arguing that. But on quote unquote average homes, right? If you look at the average sales price in your area and you look at home prices in that price range, or his estimates in that price range, it was less than 2% off this estimate from the appraised value. Now, I know there's people listening going, yeah, right, but I had this listing or I had this. I understand that. But what we have to understand is that in mass, this is getting better and better as time goes on. It's
like the self-driving technology in a car. Right?
100%.
It only gets better.
Right. And that's the thing. The MLS is not a perpetual database, and Zillow is. And what I mean by that is when a home hits the MLS, it hits the market, it sits there, it closes, it vanishes. Zillow, and the MLS doesn't do anything with that data. Where Zillow does, it retains that sale and uses it in all of its future calculations and algorithms, which means just through the very nature of AI, it gets smarter and smarter and smarter. And going back to the advantages of the iBuyer model, look, last year I had to buy several cars and family members and whatnot, and then one for myself. And those that know me know that I'm a big Tesla guy. When you buy a Tesla, you go online, you click 8 or 9 things, you plug in your credit card information, and you're done. There's no salesperson, there's no haggling, there's no anything. And I'm sorry, it is appealing as hell. And I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but if that option was just as seamless and smooth in the real estate market, or any market for that matter, people are going to find it appealing and people are going to gravitate towards it as long as it's not financially damaging to them.
Right. So Zillow looks at this. They say, we have a hold on the attention, which is everything. Right? We have a hold on all the data. We have these estimates already with us. And honestly, and if you do a deep dive on iBuyers and all that, they also have a strong hold on the real estate community.
Of course.
The number one income for Zillow is the realtors paying for that premier agent or
for
whatever.
the lead, sure.
So it's they have all of this and they say, okay, we're gonna step it up a notch and we're gonna start buying 7,000 homes a month, and then we're gonna flip them. We're gonna sell them after small optimizations.
Right. And going back to the 15% thing. So what they're saying is on a $5,000 home, the seller's going to actually net $425, and then from that, closing costs and payoffs and whatever. So if they're able to come in and buy that house for maybe $410 or $415, where the seller's leaving a little bit of money on the table, but what is that convenience worth to them? They're now buying a house, even if they paid the full $425, they're now buying a house $75,000 or more under list price, which gives them their margin to receive profit.
Well, and think about it. I mean, we talk to buyers all the time, and a lot of times the move up buyer process, it's really stressful because they have a house, they have some equity, they know that they can sell it in the market, but if the times don't align, you have two options. You either, risk it and risk losing your deposit and everything, or you lose on the house, or even worse, I mean, not even worse, but you have to get into one of these weird loans where it's more expensive. Those bridge loans is just not optimal.
It's 100% true. And again, this market does not lend itself to this. But as a 25 plus year veteran, this market's a flash in the pan.
Well, we'll get to that. So what happened? What happened was they said, okay, we're not doing the iBuyers anymore. The stock plunged. Mm-hmm. They have about 18,000 homes that they still have. Where they're expected, or the estimate is they're going to lose about 7% of the amount of money that they bought it for. And even worse, the PR nightmare is they lost 20. Well, they didn't lose. They had to fire 25% of their sales force.
Yes, and they started off suspending the program, and then they subsequently completely terminated it.
Yeah,
and that is the cause of rejoicing for the real estate community.
Yes. So again, why did this happen?
I think a couple things. Okay, I think the iBuyer model is a lot less sexy in this market than in a normal market. And, going back to the point you just made, I think it's really important to break this down because I have people ask me all the time, should I sell first and then buy, or buy first and then sell? And what I always tell people is you could get screwed either way. Okay. If you buy first and then sell in a normal market, you may have to sell your home at a discount. Okay. And leave some money on the table. If you sell first and then buy, you may have to settle on the house that you're buying because just because of time constraints. Now, again, in this market, you could put your house on the market for full price, sell the damn thing in 17 seconds.
Dude, and the stress too. I mean, You're 2 weeks from your closing and the closing on your house, and, maybe you're solid on your purchase, but you don't really know if the person buying your house is, just the stress that you have to go through, even when things go smooth. If you do a simultaneous closing, that's a stressful day.
Absolutely.
I don't care who you are.
Absolutely. And so I think Zillow, I think two things led to Zillow's demise here short term is that, number one, this market is just not conducive. And I done research where they bought one house, an example, that was listed, I believe, for $509. It had been sitting on the market for like 57 days, and they ended up paying $566 for it. So the iBuyer model does not work in a bidding war type of environment.
Yeah.
That's the first thing.
The other thing that they talked about too is when, they did the call and everything, they're talking about, look, when they buy a house, they buy the house thinking there's a couple of minor things that they need to do to the house in order to sell it for whatever price they need to sell it at. And the pandemic hits, and out of a sudden we have a worker shortage, and we have an inventory shortage on every single thing. Everything, hammers, everything, lumber, everything. So this is, you go back when we were starting to talk about the iBuyers, this is unexpected. Is the words that come. Nobody could have seen this happen.
Of course. And look, people got to understand that. I know we're talking about 15% as a margin there, but by the time Zillow factors in their costs and their employee expense and everything, the margins are generally pretty slim. So lumber prices, materials prices shoot up, labor prices shoot up, right? Supply and demand. When there's a shortage of everything, prices go up. And now all of a sudden their 3 to 5% profit margin turns into a 5 to 7% loss. And all of a sudden the model overnight becomes problematic for them. Now, this does not mean the model doesn't work. This does not necessarily mean that Zillow screwed up, although I do think they made some real mistakes. This just means that the market conditions right now kind of punched them in the face.
Well, this is what's interesting about this. And there's two things that I think is worth mentioning. Number one, the CEO said, at the end of the day, the thing that made him take the decision is that the scalability of this at this point, it's not interesting enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that touches on what you're saying. They weren't planning on making a ton of money per home sold. They were planning on making a little bit. But what happens is when all these prices go up and there's nobody to work, and if you're going to find somebody, you have to more than double pay. Well, that's not interesting anymore.
Right.
The other thing that I thought was very interesting, and it's not a win by any means, the largest revenue source for Zillow in the past couple of years has been the iBuyer program.
Yes.
It wasn't profitable,
Right.
which that talks about a whole other set of
Sure.
problems. But it was the largest source of revenue.
And revenue and profitability are two different things. And here's something else that people, I think, need to be aware of. When you start a major business, okay, and yes, it's underneath the Zillow umbrella, but this is an entirely different business model underneath the umbrella. When you start a business, it is super common for businesses to lose money on the front end. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
When you and I started investing in Tesla stock, Tesla just lost money quarter after quarter after quarter. And everybody was saying they were going to go bankrupt and everything else. And now all of a sudden they are the most profitable car company on the planet. Yeah. Their numbers are astronomical. Their stock is up thousands of percent just from when we started buying it. So we have to understand that it is common for a business to lose money in the first couple of years and then get ramping up. And unfortunately, the market conditions, again, punched them in the face when they would normally had been ramping up.
So one thing that I struggled with when I was, preparing for the episode is, okay, let's just take a second and think through this. The market conditions right now, they're not great for flipping because of the shortage and all that. However, the appreciation expectation is very, very high. Mm-hmm. The appreciation has been very, very high. So if that's the case, why do they stop? Now, when you look at the call and when you listen to the CEO, what he's saying is not that they are selling these houses and losing a lot of money right now, but that their focus right now is to quickly prepare these houses to be put in the market. They're just sitting on an enormous amount of inventory that they can't get optimized, to use their word, to put out for sale. The other thing too, and we talk a lot about this, is the type of homes that work with this and the type of estimates that are accurate versus the ones that aren't, at least in the research that we've done with our I guess you call it our empirical, what we've been doing with our clients, are houses that are in the normal type of price range, right? Not the most expensive one. But you have talked a lot about how the median price of houses has increased immensely because of the pandemic.
Right.
So all of these things is like these guys launched this 2 years ago, and the pandemic just threw all of these things at them that it makes it almost impossible to do this at the large scale that they are trying to do it.
Right.
However, this doesn't mean that they can't do it. It just means that you can't do it at such a large scale. Not right now.
Right. And that's an interesting point. People are rejoicing as if the iBuyer model went away. It didn't. OfferPad's doing really well. And their CEO has released some statements saying, hey, we're kicking ass here. Okay. I understand what happened to Zillow, but that's no bearing on us. And, the other thing that people have to understand when you're comparing, because I spent some time researching Zillow's iBuyer model versus OfferPad and whatnot that are doing very well. And the biggest difference that jumped out at me is the iBuyer model was one of the revenue streams for Zillow. iBuyer model is the only revenue stream for OfferPad and some of these other companies.
Right.
So, Zillow's doing so much. Maybe they jumped into this too soon. Maybe they got a little full of themselves. Maybe the market punched them in the face harder than they expected. Maybe they got a little bit too aggressive. We could talk about all this, but the iBuyer model, I know we're going to talk about this before the episode's over, is here to stay. Whether or not Zillow's in it, personally, I think they're going to come back, but The iBuyer model is here to stay. Now, this is not a model to sell every home in America, like you're saying. This is going to take away a segment of the market. We could all mentally argue over what percentage, 3%, 43%, whatever the number is. Not 100, but also not 0.
All right, I'm interested to hear your opinion on 3 things. Number 1, what happens with Zillow? Is Zillow here to stay? Is Zillow not here to stay? What's going on? Number 2, does the iBuyer model, which I think you already answered, but if you can expand a little bit on that, it's going to continue. And number 3, do you think, and this is part of number 2, I guess, is do you think this iBuyer model is just going to be one of those things, like trends that happen with the market that come and go, right? There was a lot of house flipping happening a couple of years ago, not a lot of house flipping happening right now. There might be some in the future. So what do you think happens with Zillow and with the iBuyer?
Okay, so first off, Zillow already won. And I have this disagreement, we'll call it, in discussion with a lot of my top agents. Zillow has already won because of what you mentioned earlier. Zillow is perceived as the real estate market. Okay. And I started talking about this many, many years ago when they were nowhere close. They had listings that were old. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, but there was this listing on the market that had been sold a year ago and it was still, I understand that. But as we talked about in prior episodes, Zillow has syndicated as a real estate franchise, and they're going to have a direct IDX feed of the MLS.
Well, and this is the thing too. And I think everybody listening to this needs to look at this from this lens. Us saying Zillow won doesn't mean that Zillow is better than you.
Of course not.
We're talking about the industry as a whole. Zillow as a whole, it's more convenient and has more attention than the real estate, the realtors as a whole. However, that doesn't mean that you can't be better than what they have to offer. You in particular, you as a good agent that you are. But as a whole, yeah, I agree. Zillow won versus the vast majority of realtors.
Yeah, look, Zillow won the attention game. So Zillow is not going anywhere. Zillow will continue to get better and better. Their revenue is a big deal. And by the way, another thought just crossed my mind that the Zillow CEO mentioned that I think is really important to understand. Zillow is a publicly traded company, meaning that their first and most important priority is to their shareholders. So if the iBuyer model short term is hurting revenue per share, okay, and dropping their stock price, they have to suspend it or cancel it just for that reason, because they have to answer to their shareholders. That does not mean that does not make it a permanent thing. So I think Zillow's never going anywhere. They've won already. I mean, is it possible that they make some horrific management decisions? Sure. I mean, Sears went down and Toys R Us went down, and anybody could go down. But I think that Zillow's not going anywhere. And just like we have large mortgage companies, okay, that we have to compete with, and this is the whole premise of the podcast. Zillow doesn't necessarily put you out of business. The existence of Zillow forces you to change your game, your tactics, your value proposition. And if none of those things happen, Zillow can put you out of business. But if you capitalize and position yourself right, I think you could really thrive despite anything. Going back to the iBuyer model, same thing. I don't think the iBuyer model goes anywhere. I do not think this replaces real estate agents at large, but we got to get very clear on what we are bringing to the market. Okay. You and I in our business and on this podcast have talked a lot. If all we're doing is
we talk.
Yeah. if all we're doing is sending out an application link, then we are these big internet lenders and they will crush us. But if we bring local knowledge, if we bring branding through video and all of those types of things, it'll be there, but it won't be an 800-pound gorilla that we can't get rid of. So I don't think anything happens to either of those. I do think that this market makes it a lot more difficult for the iBuyer world, but this market, this too shall end.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think they went wrong with the trying to do it at scale so quickly, and they went wrong with trying to do it. And because they were trying to do it at scale so quickly, they went ahead and did it 100% with automation. If you think about the other things that Zillow have been trying to do, they have put people in charge of those things. Like they're trying to create a real estate company for themselves. They're trying to align with mortgage companies. There are people behind that.
Right.
And maybe while I think we all agree that the automation, quite frankly, for everything will be, we don't know if it's going to be here in 10 years or in 20 or in 5 years, quite frankly, but the automation will be there at some point. Right now it wasn't. And this was a big bet that obviously, I mean, with these market conditions, it flopped. So having said that, I agree with you on the Zillow thing. I think they're here to stay. I wouldn't be surprised if they come back and they add a human element and try to do it at a smaller scale to start. You know, like they did with the real estate company, where they started in just certain areas instead of trying to go so big right away. And then same thing, the iBuyer model, the convenience is just, it's the best sales pitch you can have. It's just so convenient for a client to sell the house that way, that we often talk about how stressful the real estate transaction is, or it can be. We all try to do our best to make it less stressful, but it's very stressful. It's just very emotional for the seller and the buyer. And if you can make it more convenient, you win. And I can't imagine of something more convenient than this iBuyer model. One thing that's interesting, and you talk about, is the whole having to answer to the shareholders. I don't know if you're aware, because, you know, of your age, but there was a big controversy because of a TikTok about Zillow going in. And by the way, this is wrong, but it became viral. Do you know what that means?
I think that means a lot of people shared it.
Okay, there you go. Good job.
There you go. Thank you.
So
I take notes when you talk.
I taught him that before the podcast. Yeah, it became viral because he was saying that it was just a dude just saying that Zillow was coming in the market with this iBuyer model, and what they were trying to do is monopolizing and increase the prices artificially. This was so viral, so big, that Zillow has to release a statement explaining themselves from just a random dude's TikTok.
Right.
And then a month later, they stopped the iBuying program. Now, I'm not saying that this is because TikTok and this is what happened, but my point is, you know, they're not making a lot of money. They're getting bad publicity from that. The shareholders are getting hurt. They go, okay, let's just step back, sell the homes that we have in our inventory right now because we can't find anybody to fix them, and then we'll reassess.
Now, look, let's address probably the biggest pushback when I speak to real estate agents about this is people are always going to want a human element, somebody to hold their hand and walk them through the process. And I both agree and disagree with that. Okay, so and I'd like to hear your take on that. I agree with that in the sense that a segment of the population that will always apply to, okay? I disagree with that because I think the size of that segment of the population is constantly decreasing, okay? If you look at travel agents, okay, it used to be unheard of that people would plan their own trip, and now it's weird to not. Stocks. The thought of picking out your own stocks was bizarro world 20 years ago. In a previous episode, we talked about the fact that I'm comfortable putting my kids in an Uber, where that was incomprehensible. We have to understand, so Tesla went to online auto sales. Volvo is now moving towards it. GM is now moving towards it. The dealer network, the automobile dealer network, and I've spoken to some high-level executives, they've said it's screwed. So we have to understand that although historically, yes, people want a human being, although currently, yes, a segment of the population wants a human being, and I could argue a large segment, but we're ignorant if we think that that can't and won't change down the road because it's changed with every other thing. We routinely give up money and privacy for convenience.
And expediency.
Yeah,
you can be fast.
That's Gary Vee's whole thing. Time is the most important asset, and anything you could do to save time. And by the way, whether you actually save time or the perception of saving time, because I've been on a street corner in New York City waiting for my Uber and 37 taxis pass me, and I feel like I'm saving time. So that's a thing, and it will public and human perceptions and expectations have changed and will continue to change as time goes on, and that's the purpose of this. So we stay ahead of that curve.
Well, I'll add something to that. I think you're right on that, but I think where things are moving, where everything has been moving, is people are doing more research. People are trying to get more educated. That's the trade-off when it comes to the time and the expediency. People are taking their time to do a lot of research before they actually make the purchase. How long did it take you? How long did you look at cars and you look into Tesla and you look over that before you actually made the Tesla order?
It was 18 months.
18 months, right?
And by the way, it's a freaking car.
It's a car. When we talk to our clients, they've been looking at the market, thinking about buying, talking to people for 12 months, 6 months before they even talk to us about actually getting approved. So this is where people are choosing to spend their time rather than when it's pre-decision, not post-decision. But this is the opportunity, right? So if Zillow and iBuyer and all of this is the future, okay, it's definitely not the present. It's not working out right now. But if it's the future, you are in a great position to position yourself into being the expert at these things, into hand-holding and being that quote-unquote human element, but not for the actual transaction, but for everything that comes before it. And then you can capitalize at the transaction itself. Become the expert, right? That's what we try to do on our business. That's what everybody that it's interested in buying and doing something tries to get feedback from the expert. So same thing about what you're saying. There's a lot of people that go and buy stocks and, they don't necessarily use somebody in specific, but there's a lot of people that have made a ton of money, not necessarily trading stocks anymore, but talking about what stocks to trade, where to trade them, where you should go. I mean, Jim Cramer comes to mind. There's a bunch of people online selling courses and things like that. Look, the opportunity is there if you choose to see them.
Absolutely. And although there is a segment of the population that will always give up a little bit of money for convenience, on the flip side, there is always a segment of the population that will pay a little bit more for excellent service. When, the people that use travel agents, the travel agents aren't necessarily, I mean, they are, but the purpose of going to a travel agent is not to make sure that the airline gets booked. The purpose of the travel agent is for the travel agent to say, hey, here is, if you want to rent a boat, here is the best place to go. I could get you a discount. And by the way, you have a special needs child. I'll make sure that the right life preserver is on the boat for your child when you get there. And transportation is like, and
if anything happens, call me. That's it.
It's those little luxuries. And I know in my life, more so than yours because you're cheap, but in my life, I routinely
fiscally conservative.
I routinely pay extra money for convenience and service and everything else. So what the way to combat this is that what are you doing to add value, service, expertise, knowledge? What I tell people all the time is find out what Zillow's not teaching people, and that's your messaging. And if you really double down on that, Zillow could work as an asset to you, but you can't go about business today the same way as you did 5 years ago because the world has changed.
So listen, guys, I think we thought about doing this a while ago. We wanted things to settle a little bit. Everybody's just talking shit about Zillow, and a lot of it it's warranted. A lot of that they deserve it, but you have to see past that. I think it's important to break down what happened, like we did, to understand where the obstacles are right now, where the obstacles were and where the obstacles are, and for you to look at it from that lens and understand that if you're going to continue being in real estate, if you're going to be in real estate for a number of time, you're going to have to learn how to cohabitate with companies, if not Zillow, like Zillow, and if not Zillow doing iBuyers, then iBuyers from other companies. You're going to have to learn how to not only cohabitate with them, but make money from them. So that's what we got.
Yeah. I got one last question for you. And I think it's a great closing point. Do you think, and look, before the hate mail starts, like we're guessing here like the rest of us. Okay.
Yeah.
But that being said, do you think Zillow re-enters the iBuyer model at a later date? Yes or no?
I would bet a lot of money that they do.
And why do you say that so strongly?
Because of what we talked about. I think they created a lot of revenue from it. I understand that they didn't make a lot of money. And when I actually look at the conference calls and listen to the reason why they're stepping back, it sounds more like we're stepping back and letting this market cool off but it sounds like under normal conditions, there is a lot of possibilities and a lot of, there's the ability to make money. The other thing that I think too is they have the attention. I mean, they have everything they need to be successful in this particular field. So, you know, as a consumer, and this is just talking as a consumer, not thinking beyond that. As a consumer, the iBuyer sales pitch of sorts, it's very, very attractive.
Sure.
And I just can't get past that, past how attractive this is. So I think they're going to go back in. What about you?
I agree with you. I think when the market shifts, I mean, this is the hottest real estate market in the history of America. So
combined with shortage of workers and shortage of materials and shortage of a lot of things. Right. This is not just the real estate market is hot on its own and then everything else is business as usual.
It's a super valid point. Workers shortages, all these things that are really, really unusual. So I think when we get past this weirdness, which by the way, I don't think is happening tomorrow. I think it's going to be weird for a while. But I think when we get past this weirdness and, you know, maybe Zillow is sitting back watching the offer pads of the world, seeing how they're doing it, taking notes. I think at some point the market and some additional research gets them back into that model. It may be a few years from now. And again, I don't think it's going to be in a few months. It could be, but I don't personally think it is. But I'd be very surprised if 5 years from now or 8 years from now that's not back. I really would be.
Having said that, they screwed up.
Oh, without question.
They did.
No. They screwed up. And as a real estate industry, rejoicing is appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I hear too many people saying, okay, Zillow's dead. And I think that's a very dangerous thought process.
See, those are the two differences. Be happy because Zillow, it's a huge competitor, is a beast. Seeing, you know, we're the underdog here. Seeing a big competitor like that get hurt, you know, gives you a little bit of, that's human, right? It makes you a little happy. That's fine. But don't just put your guard down.
Right.
That's the main thing. Don't put your guard down because they're not defeated. They're not out of the game. They just took a big punch in the face.
Yes. And they're still influencing and changing consumer expectations and consumer behavior. And we have to act accordingly and shift appropriately.
Dude, it happened with mortgages. I don't know if you know, but like Better.com, the CEO got on a Zoom call and fired 900 employees on a Zoom call.
I actually did not hear that.
900 employees. This is Better.com was rated the #1 company to work for. I guess not for those 900
people now disagree with that.
That's about 10% of their sales force. They just all jump on a Zoom call and the CEO in a very, what it looks like in the video, very candid way say like, is this bad news? You're unemployed, effective immediately. He looked like he was having lunch too. Just a bad look.
Look, again, though, this is not a fatalistic outcome for these fintech companies. These are just stumbles along the way that we think are market influenced because of everything we've discussed.
That's it. Just, hey, what we have to tell you is don't let your guard down, okay? Just take advantage of the opportunity, you know, cheer because Zillow sucks right now, but be prepared because they might come back, and be prepared to take advantage of the opportunity of what might come in the future. Just be prepared.
So look, the question we like to leave everybody with all the time, what are you doing today to prepare for the real estate of tomorrow? Guys, thank you very much for listening. This is the best damn real estate podcast out there. Share with your friends. Leave us a 5-star review. Smash that follow button, and we'll see you in the next episode in 2 weeks.
See ya. Well, thank you guys for listening. And now it's your turn to implement everything you learned today.
Look, you have a question, you have a topic for a future episode?
Share with us.
Yeah, tell us what you're doing. What are you doing today so you could be successful tomorrow? Send us an email at success@realestateoftomorrow.com.
And don't forget to leave us a review, an honest review.
Screw an honest review. Leave us a 5-star review. And for every 5-star review we get, we're going to send you a badass Real Estate Meme t-shirt.
Those shirts are hilarious.
See ya.